From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
Kamala, you're fired!
I say, bring it on.
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Hello and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham, live in Washington, D.C. Russia keeps a watchful eye on the U.S. presidential election, and the war in Gaza takes another deadly twist. We'll get to all of that and more, but first, here's a look at the latest headlines. Donald Trump says he had every right to interfere in the results of the 2020 presidential election. This as the convicted felon faces an updated federal indictment in the elections interference case. About 10,000 hotel workers strike across the United States after Marriott, Hilton, and Hyatt hotels failed to reach a contract deal with the workers' union. Protesters demand higher wages on Labor Day weekend, which is typically one of the busiest times for travel in the country. Germany's far-right party, the Anti-Immigration Alternative for Germany, or AfD, wins by a landslide in the country's regional election. This is the first political win for the far-right in Germany since World War II. Azerbaijan's ruling party wins snap parliamentary elections by a narrow margin. Opposition parties denounce the results and say they have proof of widespread voting violations. And an official Iranian investigation into the helicopter crash that killed President Ibrahim Raisi in May blames weather conditions for the accident. The military report finds no signs of sabotage in the helicopter's parts or systems. We begin in the Middle East. Over 100,000 Israelis took to the streets to protest against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The uproar comes after the Israeli military recovered the bodies of 6 hostages from Gaza in a late-night operation on Saturday. Following an autopsy, the Israeli military said that the hostages were shot and killed at point-blank range just hours before their bodies were found in a tunnel used by Hamas. Now, during the operation, Israeli-American hostage Hersh Goldberg Poland's body was also recovered. According to American officials, Goldberg Poland, along with 2 others, were supposed to be released by Hamas as part of a ceasefire deal. In fact, Goldberg Poland's parents had recently spoken at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, where they urged the party to press Israel to accept a hostage release deal. Meanwhile, Israel's largest labor union joined the nationwide strikes and accused Netanyahu of deliberately rejecting a deal.
This country was built on some core values. One of them is strictly that the government of Israel will do everything in its power to bring back hostages and soldiers from captivity wherever they are. And this government, because of political reasons and for the right extreme coalition of Netanyahu, is breaking those values.
We are very, very sad and very, very angry about our government, that all they does is care about their position in the government. It doesn't care about the hostages and doesn't do anything in order to release them. The deal should have been signed a long time ago, and these people for sure, like many others, could have been saved.
Now the Israeli prime minister is pointing the finger at Hamas for rejecting the hostage release deal and has vowed to avenge the deaths of the 6 hostages.
In recent days, as Israel has been holding intensive negotiations with a mediator in a supreme effort to reach a deal, Hamas is continuing to steadfastly refuse all proposals. Even worse, at the exact same time, it murdered 6 of our hostages. Whoever murders hostages does not want a deal.
In Washington, President Joe Biden said he was devastated and outraged by the news. The White House has also confirmed that it's working with Prime Minister Netanyahu's office to secure a hostage release deal as soon as possible. The protests weren't limited to just Israel, as they also erupted in New York and London. In Manhattan, the Israeli-American hostage was given a special memorial where his parents spoke at a rally attended by thousands as chants of "Seal the Deal" echoed in Central Park.
Just 3 months ago, Hamas released a video of Hirsch, the first proof of life his family received since he was kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival on October 7. He gestured at the camera with his amputated arm, and despite the shock, this video was a sign of hope for the Goldberg's Fallens, to our family, and for the families of all those lost in the tunnels of Hamas. Hirsch was alive, and now we know that other 5 hostages were alive too. None of this had to happen. I would like to call President Biden to tell Prime Minister Netanyahu, do not delay the deal.
With more protests lined up through the week, Israelis are putting pressure on Netanyahu to accept a ceasefire deal or resign. Now, it's unclear how much longer Netanyahu will in fact prolong the war against Hamas. About 100 hostages are still being held captive in Gaza with no clarity on when or how they will in fact be rescued. And moving to Russia, Moscow says it sees Vice President Kamala Harris as more predictable than her opponent, Donald Trump. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov sat for a rare TV interview and offered a variety of opinions on the upcoming U.S. presidential election. Reiterating that Russia does not favor any candidate, the Kremlin spokesman said Democrats are more predictable than Republicans, including Vice President Harris. Now, earlier in July, when President Joe Biden was still running for president, Vladimir Putin said Moscow actually preferred the current commander-in-chief over Donald Trump. Meanwhile, Peskov on Sunday accused Washington of meddling in Russia's affairs. He added that bilateral relations between the two countries remain at a historic low and that there was no magic wand to halt the war in Ukraine overnight. The Kremlin also expressed doubt regarding Donald Trump's repeated claims of being able to end the war within 24 hours if reelected to the White House. Both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have contrasting approaches to the war in Ukraine, with the Democrats supporting Ukraine with more aid to fight Russia, while the Republican demands halting U.S. support. With their first debate just about a week away, both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump will get a chance to outline their vision for addressing both the war and the next phase of U.S.-Russia relations. Now, according to latest polls, Kamala Harris continues to lead Donald Trump nationwide, including in key battleground states. What is known for certain, Russia is taking a keen interest in the U.S. election with an eye on the outcome. In fact, according to U.S. intelligence, the Kremlin is even actively attempting to influence the results in its favor. And staying with Russia, in a remarkable show of camaraderie, North Korean leader Kim Jong Un received a shipment of 24 purebred Orlov Trotter horses from Russia. Now, it's worth noting that this isn't just any breed. In fact, these horses are Kim Jong Un's favorite and are often featured in his propaganda images. However, these horses signify more than just a gesture of friendship. In fact, several reports suggest the horses are part of a payment for North Korean artillery shells that were sent to Russia for its war in Ukraine. Now, this is not the first time that Russia and North Korea have showered each other with gifts. In fact, earlier this year, Kim Jong Un sent a pair of Pungsan dogs, a local breed, to Vladimir Putin. The Russian leader then, in return, gifted North Korea exactly 447 goats. And the gift exchanges between the two rogue leaders goes beyond animals. In June, during Putin's first visit to North Korea in nearly 25 years, the leaders swapped several luxurious gifts. Putin presented the North Korean leader with a Russian-built Autos limousine, which is the second of its kind that Kim Jong Un has received. Alongside the limousine, Putin also gave Kim Jong Un a tea set and a dagger. In return, Kim Jong Un gifted Putin artwork and a bust depicting the Russian leader. Pyongyang has been deepening its ties with an increasingly isolated Moscow since the start of the Ukraine invasion. And South Korean intelligence last week noted that it has so far monitored over 13,000 shipping containers suspected of carrying weapons going from North Korea to Russia. The gift exchanges certainly underscore the military partnership between the two rogue nations, but have yet to show an ability to expand beyond these hard power exploits, which still aren't producing dividends for either country amid their respective saber rattling. And now to Canada. The border between the United States and Canada is experiencing an unexpected increase of undocumented immigrants. According to Customs and Border Protection, a record high 5,000 undocumented Indians entered the United States from Canada on foot in June alone. For the first time ever, a higher number of Indian immigrants have entered the United States via the Canadian border than the Mexican one. Washington has alerted Ottawa as concerns mount over the Trudeau government's visa policies. Here's our report with more.
The US-Canada border, once the world's longest symbol of peaceful coexistence, has quietly become the front line of a new immigration challenge. Stretching nearly 9,000 kilometers, which is more than twice as long as the US-Mexico border, this vast route has seen an unprecedented surge in undocumented Indian immigrants crossing into the United States. In June 2024, the situation reached a tipping point. That month alone, a record 5,152 undocumented Indians crossed from Canada into the US on foot. This figure not only shattered previous records, but also marked a significant shift in migration patterns. Because for the first time in history, more Indians were recorded entering the US from Canada than from Mexico. In 2023, a record 96,917 Indians were apprehended unlawfully crossing from Canada into the US between October 2022 and September 2023. This number represents a five-fold jump from the previous year, when over 19,000 Indians were recorded crossing at this border. Canada's role in this surge cannot be overlooked. In recent years, Canada has become an attractive destination for immigrants, particularly students. The Canadian government, eager to boost its economy, relaxed its visa policies around 2017 to attract more international students, the results of which were immediate and dramatic. Between 2018 and 2022, the number of international students in Canada skyrocketed by 61%, from 566,000 to a whopping 800,000 students. This trend, however, has not gone unnoticed by the US and the UK, both of which have expressed their concerns. The US has urged Canada to tighten its visa screening process, while the UK has suggested that all Canada-bound Indian nationals should be required to obtain transit visas for stopovers. The reason for the UK's concern is clear. The number of Indian nationals seeking asylum in the UK during transit to Canada has spiked alarmingly in recent years. In 2022, there was a 136% increase in the number of Indians seeking asylum at port in the UK compared to the previous year. And by 2023, the number had risen even further, with 1,319 Indians seeking asylum in the UK, many of them Canada-bound transit passengers. So, as the situation continues to evolve, the US, Canada and the UK find themselves at crossroads. The surge in undocumented crossings at the northern border and the spike in asylum claims by Indian nationals in the UK are forcing all three countries to reconsider their immigration policies and their responses to these complex challenges. The once peaceful and open US-Canada border is now at the center of a growing crisis, one that underscores the growing migration crisis, particularly in a crucial election year in the United States.
And finally, a new Chinese video game has stirred massive controversy with its strange instructions. Released on August 19th, Black Myth Wukong has accumulated more than 10 million users worldwide. However, gaming influencers have been asked to avoid discussing topics including Chinese politics and feminist ideas during live streams. Gamers were also warned against trigger words such as COVID-19, quarantine, and isolation. Our final story goes inside the gaming world for more details.
For the latest Chinese game, Black Myth Wukong, expectations were already sky high since its reveal back in 2020. The game is based on the 16th century Chinese novel Journey to the West. The very same novel that's considered one of the greats of Chinese literature and has inspired hundreds of movies, TV shows, and cartoons, including Dragon Ball Z. And finally, after 4 years of anticipation, the single-player action game did not disappoint its players. Released with China's AAA rating on August 19th, the high-budget blockbuster game sold over 10 million copies worldwide in just 3 days. That's not all. Launched by Game Science, Black Myth Wukong now has more than 10 million concurrent players across all platforms, and it became the second most played game ever on the streaming platform Steam. But while the game's high-end graphics, sophisticated design, and hot blood hype has brought national pride to China, it has also become a huge source of criticism for the country. That's because in the run-up to its release, video streamers received a strange document from its co-publisher, Hero Games. The document warns players to avoid a range of topics while live streaming the game. These include offensive humor, politics, violence, nudity, fetishization, and feminist propaganda. The directive also says that players must not use trigger words such as quarantine, isolation, or COVID-19. Moreover, discussions over China's game industry policies, opinions, and news should also be avoided. These instructions have sparked a heated debate among users outside China. While some gaming influencers have celebrated the directive, saying it was a needed pushback on what they see as wokeness, others have slammed the game for a lack of diversity. Some content creators have directly defied the warnings altogether. A user named Moon launched a Twitch stream of Black Myth titled COVID-19 Isolation, Taiwan is a Real Country, Feminism Propaganda. Meanwhile, another streamer, Rui Zong, discussed China's one-child policy while playing the game. In the first week of the game's release, Chinese social media platform Weibo banned around 140 users who were deemed to be violating the gaming guidelines. Even though the controversy has attracted a lot of attention globally, it has not really dented Black Myth Wukong's overwhelmingly positive reception. People on Reddit, Weibo, YouTube, and elsewhere have been hailing the game's success. And some employers in Singapore have even given time off to play the video game. Chinese authorities and the media have been praising the game's boom, saying it has sparked interest in Chinese culture and has built pride and subdued prejudice.
That's our show for today. We certainly thank you so much for tuning in. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks again for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
Kamala, you're fired!
I say, bring it on.
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on First Post America.